get the recording started. And so this is our official start, everybody. Greetings, and I am coming to you from Menlo Park, California. And my name is Terri Givens. I am the CEO and founder of the Center for Higher Education Leadership. And we are an online portal for professional development for higher education leaders. I just put there in the chat some information. You know, we are a startup and we do rely on your memberships and subscriptions. I see some of our subscribers here. Or I should say members. We see some of our members here, and we do rely on your support to keep going during these times. So if you can't afford a membership, we've also got our I Fund Women campaign we're doing, and would appreciate a virtual tip if you like what we're doing. But in any case, one of the reasons I wanted to focus, so if you didn't see last week's video webinar, it is available. Just go to our website, you can take a look at that. And we've also been blasting it out via social media. Please do follow us. And Terrence, could you put into the chat our social media handles? Terrence, my colleague, and she'll be managing the questions and so on. And I see we already have a few questions I've gotten from folks, and so I'm making sure I share those with Terrence so we get to them. But in any case, I wanted to make sure we talked about crisis management and communications, because one of the first things I noticed when this whole thing started was the very extreme differences in the way that colleges were managing it. From Harvard, that just said, hey, we're shutting down, and not really giving students any resources right away, to, I mean, I'll use Lewis and Clark as an example because that's my son's college, but, you know, taking a very measured approach, you know, following what was going on with the local authorities, and, you know, sharing information with parents. I mean, I'm a parent too, so, you know, I'm, you know, on the Facebook page for my son's college, and we also, you know, I'm following very closely what's going on in general, and I've just been shocked at some of the communications that are coming out that don't take into account you know, the issues that students and faculty are facing. I've gotten at least one question, you know, what's happening to faculty who are in the middle of, as they're looking at promotion and tenure and so on. What's happening with students who, I mean, I take it personally, because when I was a student at Stanford, I was struggling financially. And if I had to suddenly leave campus, try to get home, you know, how was I going to afford a plane ticket or drive home? You know, I didn't have a car. You know, I relied on my on-campus job to pay the bills. I mean, there's so many factors. And any other, I wrote a little, if you can also follow me on Twitter, I'm at Terri Givens, and I wrote a little thread on leadership, because I think the number one thing we have to come at this with is compassion and empathy. Because if we, and also diversity, because, you know, I think one of the problems with the way that some administrations are responding to this in terms of communications is that they're thinking by the book. Okay, we have to do this, and you can read some of the memos that are coming out, and it looks like they were written by a committee. You know, it's like you got a little blurb here from the legal people, and a little blurb here from the financial people. It's like, start with compassion and empathy. Think about the fact that people are freaked out. Faculty are worried about, you know, faculty are already stressed out people, and now on top of all the things they have to do in terms of, you know, publish or perish, they have to get their courses online, they have to do all these other things, and I think there's been a rush to say, oh, we're just going to go online. And that's not the way it works. I mean, we need to give faculty and students some breathing room. And, you know, so some colleges have said, okay, we're going to do an extra week of spring break to give time. But, you know, communicating these things and showing that you're taking into account the feelings of the people you're working with is so critical. But anyway, so we have Jonathan Friedman and Kimberly Gray, who are here today. John, he's like me, got his PEN America sign up there. And we appreciate John. He's been a contributor to our newsletter, Higher Ed Connects. And we met about almost a year ago, when we were both on a panel at American University talking about free speech issues, and we had some great discussions there. And he's really an expert on dealing with crisis, because of one of the bigger crises on campus over the last year, and especially around the issue of communications, has been the free speech issue. And then we also have Kimberly Gray from Uvii, who's going to talk about ways we can communicate with students. work with them in this remote situation in ways that makes it more effective and efficient. So in any case, I'm going to start with John. So go ahead and unmute yourself, and he's going to talk for a bit. But if you have questions, please put them into the chat.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Terri. I'm thrilled to be here. And, I think as we all are adjusting to this new normal, it's wonderful to have opportunities to still be engaging with other people, close, but from afar, or I should say from just the right amount of social distance. For those who don't know me or my work, I work at PEN America. PEN is a near 100-year-old literary and free expression organization. And we got active in the realm of free speech on college campuses about 4 years ago now, seeing that there were a lot of people talking past one another, free speech advocates on one hand, and advocates often of diversity, equity, and inclusion on the other, who seemed to both be talking about around each other's arguments, and a great deal of kind of animosity and pitting, basically what we view as two critical values that are equally or both at least important to the core mission of higher education, being pitted one against each other. And so a lot of our work has been about bringing people together, about developing practical and principled solutions for higher education. The impetus or kind of underlying mission for a lot of our work stems from a charter written in 1948. It's a PEN International Charter, which talks about the importance of free speech as an international human right, but also commits the organization and its members to not only defend free speech but work to dispel hatreds. So we have been working for a long time with a kind of dual mission that is not just free speech in the abstract, but thinking about how free speech can be balanced as a principle along other values in higher ed, diversity, inclusion, etc. And what's been really interesting about my work, and why I think we're all figuring out how our work pivots into the coronavirus moment. But what's been so interesting about my work is the way in which, because so many free speech crises have been flaring up on college campuses for the past few years, I have actually spent a great deal of time looking at how universities communicate, thinking about how they communicate, and talking to people in different roles internally about how teams of people with different kinds of expertise come together to communicate a shared message in the midst of some kind of crisis. Now, of course, coronavirus is somewhat different than a speaker coming to campus. It's different than a protest that gets out of control, or a situation with a professor and something they tweeted that people are upset about. So it's I don't want to say that it's all easily convertible things that I have learned to this moment, but I do believe that there are some kind of simplified or core truths to thinking about how we communicate as an institution. That I talked to Terri about how we could apply those for this moment in higher ed. So first, I want to say that anyone who knows higher education well knows that any single university is no single thing at all. It's complicated, it's large, it's segmented, it's anarchic. You have different parts of it that do different kinds of things. So it's really fundamentally unlike something like, let's say, Google or Facebook or the municipal government. It really has a lot of different levers that can be pulled, and different parts of it that communicate to their own outward audiences. And so in a moment of crisis, this becomes vital to consider, what is the university and its leadership doing to help not just its outward or public facing community understand what the university is doing, but help the different parts inside of it understand what is the kind of common message. So I think there's a lot to be thinking about in terms of the mechanics internally, in terms of how a message is communicated, how different parts of the university are consulted, thinking about who's drafting language and how it turns into kind of outward facing commentary, and frankly, who's seeing that commentary or who's reading that message, proofing that message before it goes out. One of the things that I've seen a lot of universities get better at actually is just before maybe the president or someone on his staff has drafted something, just before that it becomes public, you might have different personnel in different offices review it first and kind of give feedback, not just on, what it says or is there a typo, but how does it sound? How does it feel? And this is where the art of communication is so critical, because often it's not just about facts. It's not just about what the university is doing today. Terri, as I mentioned ago, it's not just about Harvard saying, or any institution saying, we're closing down. It's about, what is going on in the minds of the people who you're expecting to hear this message. I often say that in the wake of a very intense crisis on campus surrounding free speech, sometimes the last thing that people want to hear about is the First Amendment. It has, I think this is something that universities have improved upon, where at first, a lot of times the first gut message or first instinctual response to something is, um, um, uh, well, we can't do anything about that because it's the First Amendment. And I think similarly with the coronavirus, the first instinctual response is very clinical. Here's what's going on, here's what we're doing, here's how we're reacting. But it's important to kind of consider, all the different people who are going to be reading that message, all the different mindsets that they're going to be in, and kind of finding a way to hit the right tone, frankly, in terms of how you communicate. So, of course, the first step is to figure out what you want to say, what is the meat of what you're saying. I think, in for most institutions that involves consulting with general counsel and consulting with different, maybe there's a senior leadership committee, what is our message? What are we doing? How soon are we closing? But then there's a step between just translating those core facts and communicating them outwardly, which is, how are we going to say this? How do we signal empathy? How do we communicate the right kind of almost like singing the right note? I think is perhaps the best comparison. And I think it's really vital that universities understand that, just because the president, or maybe it's a chancellor or a provost is the one speaking outwardly, often, they're speaking for the community. I think of the Dr. Seuss book, The Lorax, when he says, I speak for the trees. And I think it's kind of similar, except we have a lot of different trees involved in universities. But similar in terms of that sense of responsibility, that sense of having to speak for a community on an issue. I think this is where, when we talk about what it means to be a leader, we're talking about what it means to be a humane leader, to channel the right kind of empathy, to consider, Terri, you mentioned a minute ago, like diversity of audience, diversity of experiences that are hearing these messages and what they want to hear. So you want to have, what you want to say. You want to have, you want to be thinking about how you're going to say it, and how words are going to hit people, how sentences, are going to be digested by an audience. And then you also want to think about timeliness of response. So this is where the crisis question comes in. And I get asked this all the time on college campuses when consulting with different senior administrators groups, how soon should we say something? If there is, let's say, flyers on campus, or a situation with a professor on Twitter, it's heating up. There seems to be a lot of energy. Certainly if you're active on social media, even a pin drop can sometimes feel like the whole world is paying attention to it. And there's a lot of nervousness. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of intensity. There's a lot of pressure. Sometimes it's a phone call, from a key donor or a member of the board, or the board of trustees, or an alumni who calls an office and gets in there with a very core, like, well, we have to say something on this message, and, we want to say it now. And so, there's a lot of intense pressure. And I think what university communities can do as a whole is try and recognize that most people who are running these institutions are trying to act in good faith, are trying to do their best. I think, if anything, what the free speech crisis of the past 4 or 5 years has done is really undermine trust in leaders in universities. And so that's something that I often also preach and encourage, is like, give people a second, have some trust in them. But at the same time, in a crisis, we want to know what's going on. If people are going to be closing their laboratories, I know there was a university that, I won't say why I know it well, but I know one that this week on Monday said, don't worry, scientists, we're keeping our laboratories. And on Tuesday said, actually, we're closing them all on Wednesday. So, a lot of chaos ensues. People are making plans. It's very difficult to plan for a situation that's shifting. So I think, how do you do this? What are some tips and guidelines to bear in mind when we think about timeliness of response? So first is, you can communicate your intentions to communicate now without having to know all the answers. And that often is actually incredibly assuring, and can really help people feel confident that something is coming, only if you think about, you're like, well, maybe you say, I don't want to say anything yet. I don't know what we're going to say. I don't want to say the wrong thing. There's a lot of fear sometimes. But actually putting out the statement that says, we're developing this, we're sorting out our response. We're going to have an answer for you tomorrow. The challenge is if you then, if you do that, you really want to make sure that you have the answers tomorrow, that you have the more communication the next day. So if you do choose to put out something in an interim way, sometimes with, incidents on college campuses, universities can't always say everything that they know about it. Sometimes facts are kind of rolling in. There are disputed accounts of what even quote unquote happened, and so sometimes it's become very common for a communications office to put out something on social media. We've heard about an event that happened in the square or that area of campus. We're investigating it, and we hope to communicate our response or our policy or some next steps in the coming days, or later tomorrow, or as soon as possible. All of those messages can be sent immediately. Those messages don't take vetting by different offices. They don't take a great deal of consultation necessarily, and so even doing that can be really helpful in assuring for a community, particularly if you have a situation, let's say you're talking about this current crisis where you're thinking about communicating with parents about students moving in and out of residence. Saying something at the outset that lets people know that you're working on it, that you're paying attention to it, that you're working through it, I think that can be really helpful. In terms of then how, what can you do and how do you pull it together? I think it's vital that people realize that this is in many ways an unprecedented crisis, and it affects everything at the university. I mean, it just in the same way that every sector of society right now in different cities has been kind of slowly closing down, and we're kind of day by day reacting to what is essentially an evolving and changing situation. Similarly, we have to understand that universities are large. They have a lot of ripple effects. They have a lot of small moving parts. And so understanding that there is a need not just to communicate a message, we're closing, not just to kind of put out something that provides facts and that is empathetic, but that is holistic. And so this is where, sometimes a message from a president is the way to do that. You want to kind of articulate in long form, a quote, something that somebody wants to communicate, but other ways of communicating, FAQs, an FAQ page that a lot of universities have set up are really useful. Thinking about if you can make it searchable, where people could type in, what's going to happen with my lab, or what's happening with tenure, or is the athletic center closed? Having that central resource that you can then send around to people that says, here's a kind of archive of everything that we're saying, everything that we're doing, and everything that we're thinking. And frankly, making clear to the public, to the different constituents in a university, this is an evolving situation. We are responding to it as it evolves. We are, I think it's fair to say at this point, nobody really knows when this is going to end and how this is going to twist and turn further. So I think, for universities, we all know that too now. We're all living through it, and so we don't have to pretend that there's that certainty there. But I think continuing to show empathy, continue to be clear, continue to communicate about a wide variety of issues in one place is going to be really helpful. And then my last point that I want to make is just the importance of truth and facts. So universities are unlike other institutions in society. Right now, we are living through a moment where we have seen all kinds of institutions of our democracy attacked, and universities have been pretty much a bulwark against that for a number of years. And I think that role must continue. And so I think something that universities can be thinking about doing for, I think there are ranks of administrators who are now uncertain about the next step in their work. But one thing that I think should continue to animate them is a kind of understanding that right now they have a role to play in ensuring that information is circulating rather than misinformation or disinformation. And so, just because universities are going online, I think doesn't mean that they no longer have those responsibilities. And in fact, I think that some of their ongoing communications can continue to be useful to communities as a means of circulating, frankly, factual information about the virus, about the spread, and about what's happening in different cities and around the world. So I'm going to pause there and allow for some questions, Terri. And that's just my general summary.
Let me go off mute. Yes. So, we've had a few questions, but one thing, I'm actually typing this into the chat as I speak, but one thing a friend of mine said is, what she'd like to see from all employers via email or social media right now is something like, we only expect you to care for one another right now. Do what you need to survive this. We are here for you. And, that's the kind of communication. I think a lot of people are just feel, it's as the kind of shock is wearing off, there's a certain, and, well, obviously we've all had anxiety, but there's also just this sense that we need some words of reassurance. um, that,
Absolutely.
yeah, so
Yeah, I
that,
mean,
go ahead.
we can't pretend like this is normal. No, I mean, there was that moment where it's kind of like realizing, if anything, this is a wonderful way. I don't want to say wonderful. That's not the right word. There, perhaps I don't even, silver lining doesn't even seem appropriate.
No.
But one of the interesting, let's use the word interesting. One of the interesting things is the way that this has, I think, it is deeply nerve-wracking and anxiety-ridden, absolutely, but it also kind of shakes us into recognizing just how many roles people are playing in their day-to-day lives. So, this isn't just about people's offices closing. Anyone who is a parent right now is struggling to understand how they are supposed to become both their children's teacher, their children's, they're teaching their children at home, they're still working a full-time job, and they're also kind of parenting, or maybe they have parents or other kinds of responsibilities in the community. And I think recognizing that nothing about this is normal, and that people are not going to suddenly become superhuman, and certainly not in the midst of a global crisis. So, I think exactly as you said, like this, we need assurances. We need to understand that this is a time for being humane with one another.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that one of the things that has come out, I mean, and again, I hate to say silver lining, but that we've all had to kind of slow down and, kind of reassess where we're at. But, it's that issue of acknowledging that faculty, students have various roles they're also playing, that, this goes beyond just the immediate community to, we may have faculty who are dealing with parents across the country, and also trying to manage their kids at home, just like you were saying, and also trying to figure out technology which they have not used before. So I'm very grateful to see some of you on here who maybe haven't used Zoom before. But in any case, I'm gonna, unless you have any last thoughts, John, I'm gonna wrap up here and pass it over to Kimberly. And but before you do that, I do want to address, Sandra had a question about promotion and tenure, and I've been kind of tracking this situation. There have been a lot of questions about if there's going to be any adjustments to that. And what I'm seeing is I haven't seen any consensus or even necessarily any clear thoughts on that yet. I know faculty are hoping that there'll be some kind of time added on to the tenure clock and so on. But I'm not seeing any real clarity on policy around that yet. And so feel free to jump into the chat if you've heard anything from your institution. But I think it's one of those things that's on the radar screen, but that people aren't quite ready to address yet, because we don't know the length of this crisis. It could go into the fall, unfortunately. So I think that that's something that administrations are going to be addressing later versus sooner. But
I would agree with that. That's what I've seen too. And I think of it kind of in parallel to what we're seeing in cities, where the kind of first response has been about health. And now all the cities are going, okay, well, what about the economy? Oh, right. Certainly being in New York right now, the idea that all of New York's restaurants and it's not just the restaurants. I mean, the incredibly high numbers of people who live in New York City and make their wages week to week through waitering or other employment in restaurants. There's a vast number of people. So I think the health thing kind of came first, and now the economy issue is on everyone's radar. So I don't see how they'll be in action. And I kind of compare it to the tenure issue similarly, which is, well, we kind of had to deal with the health issue. We had to close the residences. We had to get some sense of where we were going with this. And now we'll turn to kind of the subsidiary issues. Teaching. There's a petition at one university I saw this week where students are petitioning just for pass-fail grades, because they can't really be expected to just suddenly go online in the way that the universities kind of thought we maybe would just kind of do that and it would be okay. So I think there's a lot of issues that are still rippling here. And I think, similarly, as I said before, I would be quite surprised if all of, higher education leadership across the country decided that this was the opportunity to be unflexible on things like tenure. I don't see that coming.
Yeah, and one other question I see is if there's any advice regarding communication management, and I saw in the earlier chat comments that in some ways it feels like communication overflow. Actually, we were having a discussion about this amongst my team yesterday that we're debating how many emails we should send this week, and I'm like, well, I'm getting emails from every single organization I've ever had anything to do with, whether it's retail, my lawyer, my accountant, and they're all pushing out these emails about how they're managing the coronavirus crisis. It's like, well, don't worry, we're got things under control. And I'm like, that's great, but I mean, I don't know that I need all these emails flooding in, it's a management issue. It's a balancing act. It's like, yes, we want to be pushing info out there, and I think some schools even have gone a little overboard on the messaging, but then it's just hard to know what's the right amount.
Yeah, I think that's not dissimilar actually from other crises that have been happening. And I think you kind of, with any communications kind of management process, you have to get in a kind of routine about it. So if you are, one thing that has happened at my organization at Pan America is we've kind of consolidated it into like messages at the end of the day that kind of summarize what different people in the organization were doing today. It's actually been really nice because we're all missing one another and hearing updates we would normally get in person, but it's also become a vehicle for sharing, important information about, what's been going on in the news as the virus develops. I think that universities could consider moving to a similar model. I think when it's happening in the immediacy of it, we might be expecting universities to say something. I think right now this is something that so many universities are going through together across the country, that there's a kind of understanding of the basic, guardrails or framework in which this is developing. And now it's, a matter of regularizing that communication. Maybe it's once a day, but absolutely being sensitive to how much people can be easily overwhelmed by how much they're being told what everyone is doing.
Yes, exactly. All right, I'm going to shift it over to Kimberly. I know we had some folks join in recently, so if you don't mind introducing yourself again.
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kimberly Gray. I'm the CEO of Uvii. We are an interactive mobile learning application, actually designed for remote learning. So over the last 2 weeks, we've just been listening a lot to professors, students, institutions, and just trying to understand what their needs are and just like the bandwidth that we can assist. We have been working as a contractor with CUNY for the last 2 years, piloting and testing this mobile app, which allows students to respond to their curriculum with video comments, voice memos, and text. So very much like Snapchat meets Blackboard. So now more than ever, is an opportunity for us to start thinking about adopting more mobile-based applications that can plug into existing university portals and learning management systems like Blackboard. What I found from listening to everyone in higher education is that there is a frenzied lack of communication. And there's obviously a lot to unpack here on so many levels. But like Jonathan said before, the #1 sector in the world is healthcare, right? So behind that is education. So once, I think over the next couple of years, I'm also in New York. We're a MWBE minority owned company. So we're, in a position to be bidding on contracts for the state and the city and DOE. And yeah, everybody frankly is in crisis mode, just like the entire world. But what we have is this tool, right, of virtual communication, which we're using right now. And what we're going to be offering very soon are private access for a select group of institutions to join the platform and start piloting out based on mobile versions of their syllabus. So at this point, for us to teach effectively, we have to think about like 3 things. Access. How is everybody going to communicate and collaborate with administratively, with instructors, with students? The effectiveness of that communication, right? Whether it's posting assignments as documents, as videos, And lastly, the assessment. So what I haven't heard much from all of these platforms that are offering services is once we do get a grasp of, because let's face it, this isn't going to be an overnight change. Like this, the world has changed forever, right? So we need to adjust accordingly and like just almost, you know, have a fresh way of thinking about how to execute our ideas. One thing that we have on our side is social media. You know, is this collaborative way for us all to communicate? Like, so if you can use Facebook, you will easily be able to use Uvii. And we just need to start thinking, because I think about all the instructors that were using Blackboard for online courses. They were, you know, they're frankly a little ahead of, you know, the game at this. But I think about all the passionate instructors, because in academia, there's so many different personas, right? With teaching styles and learning styles, you know. So I think we need to utilize more virtual tools and at least with a social-based interface mobilely to enable people to communicate on these mass issues. So with our platform, you have the ability to create surveys, to ask questions. So in the next couple of weeks, we will be rolling out, you know, feedback mechanisms for us to continue conversations like this on Uvii. So stay tuned with Terri for that. But when I started Uvii 4 years ago, I'm originally from DC. Both of my parents are retired principals in DC public schools. My background was actually in film. You know, as a documentary filmmaker, I worked with Spike Lee. I did another documentary. It was on HBO called Bastards of the Party. It was about the history of gangs in LA. So I'm segueing to providing a platform via education to enable and enhance and open opportunities to educational equality. Frankly, even before this crisis, the biggest problem we felt we were solving is engagement in higher education. You know, because beyond the classroom, there's a huge drop-off rate in massive open online courses with student engagement. You know, frankly, I think there's like a 79% drop-off rate after like a week, you know. So how can we capture that same level of engagement virtually is something we've been exploring for years, working with CUNY, starting at Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn. And CUNY is the largest urban institution system in the world. You know, we're talking about 25 campuses, we're talking about 700,000 students. So a great testing ground for us. And our goal over the next couple of weeks is to ramp up and be able to help a lot of these instructors flip at least portions of their courses mobilely. So meaning being able to have an interaction somewhat similar to this, where you can respond, but actually post assignments, and in a siloed page just for that course, be able to communicate and still conduct a course with your students during the real-time class as it would have been if they were still in school. So I look forward to speaking with more professors and more administration to determine how this can easily be onboarded. I mean, obviously we think about security and encryption, but again, like when I first created Uvii 4 years ago, what we were designing was embedded video commenting. So if you think about social media in general, if you just take learning out of the equation for 2 seconds, there's no way for you to respond with a video on Facebook or so really we're just all in these boxes, but we're really not having conversations yet, guys. And it took a crisis like this for us to even really be able to talk to each other, you know. And it's ironic really, because our heads have been on our phones for the last couple of years, and like now, you know, it's a dire source, you know, but let's use this as a tool to bring us together. And I think creating siloed communities where people can have full-on conversations about tenure, and people can have full-on conversations about their difficulties understanding Blackboard because they're more of a hands-on classroom-based teacher. These are all things we can start to explore because we all are very familiar with, in some capacity, social media, a social media style interface. And that's what I think we need to, just at the very basic level, we need to start examining how we're going to be teaching moving forward. Because regardless if this whole crisis is over in a few weeks, the world has changed forever. And I think it raises so many new questions and concerns on how we are going to be going about communicating, improving the value of learning, because we based our platform on the American Association for Colleges and Universities. So they have their rubrics. Beyond standardized testing, if you think about it, what are the ways to prove students are learning, right? So you have critical thinking, you have oral presentation, civic engagement, right? So we need to take those standards and use them mobily to be able to say, hey, it may not always be that written test because what our goal is to get to professional careers is to have students excel and have learning outcomes, not be left in debt, so that was the premise of is closing educational barriers, right? And in order for us to do that, we have to be vocal. You don't get a job because you had you could great SATs because you went to college. But ultimately, you get a job because you're able to communicate and pronunciate and speak. And that is a valuable tool that is hard to articulate, with online learning or as distance learning stands right now. But what we all guys have is this phone. We all got this, So there's a lot of barriers are reduced just with this mobile device, and this is universally, So this is, we live in the most thriving country in the world, but we also have one of the lowest graduation rates for college students and tremendous debt. So I think that the numbers now, 25% of millennials are going to die with student loan debt. So, we need to start thinking of less expensive ways to combat some of these growing trends. Like there's been a lot of issues in higher education for a long time, So I think with Uvii, which stands for Universal Video Instructional Interface, we're providing a virtual collaboration app for us to continue these conversations remotely. So I look forward to speaking with you more and just, yes, learning how we can help.
Yeah, so Kimberly, I posted one question I'd gotten previously up there here about sorting necessary and effective communications.
Yes.
And, this is a question not just for, from administrator to faculty, but, faculty to student, student to faculty. I mean, I know some of the faculty I've seen are also concerned about, getting, well, actually, it ranges the spectrum. Some faculty haven't heard it all from their students, and others are getting overwhelmed with the numbers of emails and concerns they're hearing from students. And I think we can all kind of address this in different ways. But it seems like one of the things I was concerned about as I was thinking about students is this ability to use their phones. You can use Zoom on your phone. I do it all the time. You can also dial in. I know some of you are dialing in on your phones. And I think that's it becomes, again, that balancing act of finding ways to effectively communicate without being overwhelming. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Well, frankly, I'm working on that myself because, in the simplest way I can put it is, we have to take advantage of the tools that we have right in front of us. So if the whole world has been built on, classrooms haven't changed since their inception. We want to keep the focus on the students and on the professors, because those are the people who are going to be using, like, for example, Google Classroom has 40 million users. Only about 10% of that group are the ones who actually pay for it, and those, of that, they're not really even using the platform. So I implore professors and faculty to reach out to Uvii and to contact us and to tell us how we can be more efficient in helping you. So what we've been doing, again, are flipping curriculums, syllabus from standard, from online and also classroom-based syllabi to 30-minute mobile components, which are broken down into videos from instructors asking discussion-based questions, allowing students to reply with 15-second video comments or texts, or even voice memos, all within a feed, like a social media style feed. So, and within that, testing their response. Are they more engaged? Are they responding more? There's all types of data and analytical information we can learn by using the tools that are native to these students, you know. And I keep mentioning CUNY because, again, the goal here is to get people jobs and careers so they can feed their families. Like, people don't go, this is a, you know, the City University of New York, people aren't going here, you know, to be on a football team, or, you know, they're going there to make money so they can feed their families. And ultimately, that's the goal of college, right? Is to build relationships and get the information you need to be successful in life. We have to continue to provide these tools. And I think remotely, you're creating opportunities for the institutions for another revenue stream. And you're opening and barriers to students who may not have been able to afford classes or access classes before. So, yes.
And, you know, frankly, we don't know what the new normal is going to be. You know, it's interesting because for some institutions that are on the edge, I was just reading an article on Inside Higher Ed from John Warner talking about the fact that we need a bailout for higher ed because so many institutions are going to be are already on the edge of survival. Yeah. And, you know, as they're looking at doing refunds for, you know, room and board and potentially for some, because there are some institutions that have canceled completely, they aren't even teaching anymore for tuition, you know, that puts them into a real bind in terms of cash flow and so on. And so I think, you know, looking at the various tools we have, yeah, it's not just about communication. And, you know, it's also about going forward. How are we going to effectively provide an ongoing education when in this era of uncertainty? And so I think it's not just a matter of, you know, okay, so we talked about this earlier, and I think this is another mode of communication that everybody's going to have to get into, is that it's not just about the immediate moment. At some point, we're going to have to pivot to what are we going to do? What are we doing for admissions? How are we going to manage, you know, the fall if we are still on some kind of, you know, remote teaching mode? I mean, that's just going to be a huge, huge issue. You know, people are reassessing. I mean, students are just now getting to the point where they're thinking about where they're going to go. Are we going to see a huge decline in enrollment? You know, so I think that, and I think one of the things we're going to have to think about for our future work, and just keep in mind, we're doing this on a weekly basis. And I would love to hear from people here if there's specific topics, but I think another topic we're going to have to jump into fairly soon is this idea of continuity. And, you know, how do we use the tools like Uvii, especially remembering that this, you know, frankly, you know, the smartphone is going to be our mode of communicating for the foreseeable future. Some students have laptops, but, you know, most students are going to have a smartphone. And so, and making sure that those communications are effective. So I know when I was at UT Austin, I want to make sure I mention, you know, that text messages were the way we got out, in, you know, crisis information, and you know, text messages have also become an important form of communication for this generation of students because they don't read email. So we ran into when I was provost at Menlo College, we ran into this problem all the time that students were not reading their email. So when I want to come back to this question that Tracy sent me, yes. I think when it's a crisis communication, you know, or a critical piece of information, we need to have hierarchies. So if it's something students need to know right away, text message. If it's something that, you know, students can find out in the next few days, email. And then if it's something that you're getting hundreds of questions from parents and so on, it needs to be an FAQ and a website. Yep. And a lot of institutions are already doing this. You know, they have the coronavirus website, you know, they have their FAQ, but I'm not seeing, you know, I think we need to get to the point where even for parents and faculty, we are communicating being critical messages via text messages. That has to be at the top of the hierarchy, and that we are finding ways to get messages to people, because I think too many people are especially when we're in a time of such high confusion, and the messages are changing on a daily basis. I mean, my son's college in the space of a week went from, oh, we're going to let some students stay on campus, but we're going to shift to online. Oh, we're going to shift to online for the next few, through April 7th. Oh, we're going to shift to online through the end of the semester. Oh, we want you to come and get your student now. So I was on Sunday, I was looking at flights so I could fly up to Portland and drive back with my son on Friday. By Monday, I was making plans with another family to drive up on Tuesday so I could get him back here by Wednesday. So I think there's a distinction to be made between, and Jonathan, I think you already mentioned this, that there's kind of the immediate issues that we have to deal with that are changing on a daily basis. But if we aren't starting to think about the future and planning out what's going to happen in 2 months, what's going to happen in 3 months, what are our contingency plans? And this comes back to strategic planning. We have to start, getting, and I'm not talking about text messages from businesses, but I'm mainly talking about from campuses to key stakeholders. But I think we have to take a step back at some point very soon. And like I said, I'm happy to put this into our webinar schedule. What happens in the fall? What are some ways we can be preparing to provide our education online, via phone, et cetera, going into the fall semester? What are we going to do with freshmen, first year students, graduate? How are we managing our graduate students? What are we doing for the financial situation of both the college and so we need to be, and I'm a political scientist, so we need to be thinking in terms of policy. What are we telling our legislators? Are we making sure they're keeping higher education in mind as they're doing, as they're coming in with, legislation, and football.
Can I just jump in right there, Terry? That's so true, because basically the only content you see on television right now, you're constantly being interrupted with news breaks from our governors, from Trump. So obviously there's going to be a huge influx of funding that's going to be earmarked. I think first level, at the highest level of collaboration, institutions of higher education should consider coming together and maybe putting an RFP, like some type of proposal together to kind of address and assess the overall high level needs from everything, those bullets you just mentioned. And maybe that's something collectively we can create a survey or start, exploring to put together, because without any type of consensus, it's hard to make a solid argument, right? Mm-hmm. So at this point, public, private, community colleges, state-run institutions, it doesn't matter. We're talking about federal funds, so they need to be addressed. So I think on the highest level, the takeaways, I see a lot of people here, a lot of people concerned. I think we should start formulating at least a one sheet of things that we would like to address that can be put into a larger doc. I mean, you guys are all, smart people, like, got with downtime, frankly. So,
I don't know about the downtime.
Okay, maybe not downtime. I take that back. But this is a huge cause, and we need great minds, to kind of come together, and whatever, Uvii can provide moving forward, we will help.
Yeah. Jonathan?
Terry, I was just going to piggyback on that. I think absolutely you're right. The kind of moment of shutdown, it was very clear, we're shutting down for 2 weeks. We've set, I've seen so many different dates that were originally put out. We're shutting for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or spring break or after spring break. And now we're seeing how the reality of this is shifting everyone's understanding of it. And I mean, it's a rapidly evolving situation. I think that the best that universities can do right now is kind of set a date for when do they have to start, when is decision deadline, about the future, about the fall, what can they communicate, just coming back to the communications thing, there may come a time in the next month or so where universities have to start communicating that they are uncertain, that things are in flux, that we hope, we had hoped to welcome the incoming class in August, and we may still, but we are also considering different contingencies. And, one of the things that universities could start to consider doing, and I don't know if any of them are, is, if this goes on for another month or a month and a half, are there ways that they can set up mechanisms or platforms to get feedback from their communities about like the online system? I think, when so many professors were kind of told you're all teaching online as of, 3 days from now, there were so many wonderfully amusing memes and guidelines and tips that circulated online. But one of the popular ones was, why I want you to do a bad job, and it was,
Yeah, exactly.
we don't want this to, we don't want to set, there's a lot of people who have a fear that the efforts to monetize higher education, to force more professors to teach more online are going to try and take advantage of this moment. I'm not convinced that there's a kind of insidious motive behind any of this, because I think it all just came upon us so quickly and so rapidly. And I think it's probably more about more reflective of a scramble than a kind of concerted plot. And I think one of the things that's going to come out of this, okay, it could be that, we discover that we can all teach online, but it could also, frankly, be we all realize why being in person is just so darn important.
Yes.
And so, I'm not convinced that we're all going to come out of this. But in terms
Absolutely.
of that kind of message of let's do a bad job, I think if this does go longer and if it does become something that universities have to consider, the summer or the fall sessions, there's going to be a need to be more attentive to training people in better preparation for teaching online. And unfortunately, anyone who's done serious online teaching before knows that it's a huge lift to really put a whole course online properly. It takes an entirely it's an entirely different mindset from when you're teaching in person, in terms of how you structure content, in terms of whether you're synchronous with students or asynchronous, how you set up communications potential, some of the kinds that you were talking about, Kimberly. And so it's different. It's a really different animal. And so I think at some point, as you mentioned, Terri, like the contingency is going to have to start being explored. What could this look like? What are different ways we could do this? But I think at the very least, sooner than later, universities are going to have to start figuring out what they could say about this, at least to be a little transparent about the fact that we all suspect that it's creeping up in the back of everyone's minds. How long is this going to go? And I think the more that universities can be on top of communicating that uncertainty, frankly, the better off they're going to be in terms of appearing authoritative and appearing on top of things, appearing organized and appearing empathetic.
Yeah, I think it's important just to say we're thinking about it. That it's because one of the things that I found interesting being on the Facebook forum with other parents of college students is that the parents were just like, oh my God, they haven't said anything about X, Y, and Z, so they must not be thinking about it. When the reality was, of course they're thinking about it. They aren't ready. Yeah, exactly. They don't know what to say yet, and they don't know the answer. But that's the thing we were saying earlier, is it's okay to say you don't know.
Absolutely.
It's okay to say but I think what's more important at this stage is to say we're looking at a variety of contingencies. We're keeping these things in mind.
Right.
Looking at what Terrence's comment was about asynchronous and synchronous learning, I think Uvii is a testament to that, and that's also online versus in classroom courses. And frankly, I think there are ways, like you look at the popularity of TikTok and Facebook Live, and those same people who teach in classrooms may get that gratification from teaching if they can see the students, if they get that. I was watching Stephen Colbert last night. Did you guys see this? It was so sad. It was, because he was remote. He didn't have his audience in front of him. It was just like starving someone. It was just so sad, so this is new, but we can, I think, as much as it's not desirable, we have to work with what we have and come up with a group contingency plan for next steps. And then again, we have so many intelligent people here. It might be a matter of putting together a think tank to kind of, decipher how we can help, the higher ups in higher ed. Because if they don't know, and this affects, the people on this call a lot. So maybe, we need to explore making suggestive white paper-esque, proposals to the government and to the higher ups to create, some type of group effort too.
Yeah, and one of the things that you mentioned earlier that struck me is that this is affecting. So in higher ed, we tend to be broken up into silos. We've got the R1s, we've got the regional institutions, we've got community colleges. I mean, there's all kinds, and then private nonprofits. But this is affecting all of us in very similar ways. And actually, one of the reasons I created CHEL was to hopefully get more of a dialogue going on, across all of these different kinds of institutions, because it's true that there should be ways to share, and we are finding ways to share information. I mean, I want to give a shout out to I'm on a Facebook group called Pandemic Pedagogy.
I love it.
I think they've got something like 17,000 people on it. The Chronicle of Higher Ed has created a Facebook page that unfortunately I think it's private.
That's very Teachers College.
Yeah.
That's very Teachers College.
So John, you're asking, are there webinars there? So it's the problem right now is everything's scattershot. Mm-hmm. And I would like to see more collaboration going on, like you're mentioning, Kimberly. I'd like to see people talking to each other about ways we can share information in a more cohesive way. Mm-hmm. There is and I've been, and just so you know, we have a website. I'll post it here on CHEL, where I'm pulling together resources.
Please post can you post Uvii as well?
Yes, I'm posting it right now on our chat.
UviiApp.com.
And so I'm trying to keep track of a lot of this stuff, and I'm not going to put every single online webinar resource on there, but I will give. I am posting where people who are doing this kind of work are you can find them, and so our Corona resources page is a whole. It starts with the basic stuff, and then our webinars, but also there's all kinds of resources out there that we can be using. So in any case, I think that, it's interesting. I think everybody's scrambling right now. So organizations like ACE are like, well, they serve a certain kind of institution, and AAC&U serves a certain kind of institution, and the community college top organizations, and so I'm not sure how we're going to pull it together, and I hope all of you out there will help us brainstorm about this. We have some public forums where we can do that, because I think we do need to come together and say, okay, what do we need from government? I mean, okay, we say we want a bailout, but what does that mean? How can we, this was started out with discussing crisis communications, how do we work together to create forms of communication that are going to make sense as we go forward? How do we work with the National Science? Maybe the National Science Foundation is where we go and say, look, we need to create a better way to do crisis communications that is effective. And actually I have a friend who might be interested in pulling something together like that.
Oh, great.
He's has a journalism background, and we've actually been talking about doing a workshop for faculty leaders and administrators around communication. But anyway, John, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just like hearing all the different elements here. I think it's also, right now the kind of shift online has been really focused on like the core things that students need, health and, academic progress. But I think if this does go longer and as it expands, universities really have to think about not just how they're meeting those kinds of, kind of
basic needs
in terms of like research or teaching, but their values. I've been thinking a lot about on one hand, issues of free speech in this moment. We've seen a lot of challenges in a lot of countries around the world where it's one thing when we believe in democracy and then we all go live in our homes, but what happens when in Turkey they are arresting people for things they put online? I think there's a lot of concern there, and I think some of the concerns around diversity and inclusion that we know how to do and we think about in terms of like accessibility and equity, we have so much that's been invested in supporting students from different backgrounds on campus. How do we possibly start to do that when everyone is, online? And I think it's soon going to be time to start thinking much more deeply about some of those issues around like civic engagement or students social clubs, and how we get people, all the old things that we thought, universities are supposed to do in terms of their meeting their civic mission, how people interact across difference, how they meet people who are unlike them. all of that, I hope that there can emerge some ways for us to do those things. And then the last thing I'll say that we didn't touch on very much today is just how much study abroad has been affected by this in international.
Well, that's next
Wow.
week. You're
That's,
perfect
I'm
because
going,
that's
okay.
next week's.
There's
Well, I can tell you that my nephew was in Prague, had to return, and now he is taking intro Czech language and Czech history and Czech culture and Czech cinema from Pennsylvania with students in Prague. And the question is, of course, the point was he was going to be with these students in class, but then maybe there's value still in him doing these courses with students in other countries. So, not to say silver lining, but I think there are ways to try and retain universities' commitment to all of these values, and that those should be on our priority list.
100% agree. And as we run out of time, let's continue to iterate on this. Our website is uviapp.com. And as mentioned before, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be selecting a small target group of universities to start these mobile portions of curriculum through the syllabus. The pilots that we've done in the past, it's been a percentage of the students' class participation grade. So anywhere from 15 to 20%. And our business model is $10 per semester, or $20 a year, and this cost can be on the student. It's 1/20th of the cost of a textbook. So, for this instant, lifeline of communication. So, yeah, I look forward to speaking with you all and helping as much as we can.
Yes, thank you so much to John and Kimberly and all the folks who have checked in over the course of the last hour. I know we've had some folks having to come in and out, but just a reminder, I'll put it up here again, that we're hoping that we can get all of you to join us. And right now we not only have this free webinar series, but we also have our forums that are open to the public. We put the links in there and we'll send those out. And we also have our free Higher Administration 101 course. So if you're one of those faculty who happens to be on leave or something and isn't crazed right now, you feel free to join in our Higher Ed 101 course as well. We got the next cohort is starting April 1st. And in any case, I hope to see all of you here next week. But also I put in there that on Monday, Uvii is having a webinar that's focused more on their app and
remote
teaching.
learning,
Yes, remote
specifically
learning.
and distance learning. We're going to have a great panel from EduCause and Cengage. So join us. That's in conjunction with New York Ed Tech. Obviously, it will be done very remotely. So just, follow Terri. She'll be providing updates about that. And I hope you guys can join us. We'll be sending out the Eventbrite very soon. Thank you so much.
Yes, wonderful to see everybody. I'm going to go ahead and
Stay
sign
safe.
us off now. But don't hesitate to email me or any of us at CHEL or Kimberly or John, and we're happy to answer your questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
And it will be posted. Yes, it is recorded, so I will be sending it out to everybody and also posting it on our website.
Awesome.
So, in
Thank
any
you, guys.
case, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.